I obviously wanted to start the interview by saying, Richie, it's great to welcome you to the show, and it's lovely to have you stepping up to the microphone in that way. But you're not impressed with my impression at all, are you?
Oh, no, I don't mind, but you're lucky you're earning so much in the job you're in, so I'd stay with that if I were you.
Do you know, we were having this debate, so I've got to mention it, because we're kind of like in the same way that Richard Wilson, who plays Victor Meldrew, have people running up to him thinking they're the first person ever to say, I don't believe it, at the top of their voices. Do people do that to your face? Do they do the impression thing to your face?
Sometimes, but generally not to my face. It'll be an aside as someone's walking past me. And you get the same sort of thing in Australia as in England, but it's all to do with television.
Yeah.
If I were not on television, then people would just walk straight past.
Your book's out now. I'm going to mention the book in a second, but I mean, you've had two incredibly successful careers. First of all, as a player, of course, and as I mentioned to people this morning before you joined us, I mean, over 10,000 runs, over 500 wickets. That is just. I mean, I think you're amongst a handful of Australians. I think there's about 10 of you that have had those kind of records and those kind of figures.
Yeah, 10 people have done that. Mostly ones who have come across to England and played in county cricket. People like Colin McCool and others, Bill Alley, they've all done that. But it's a fairly rare thing. What it means is it was a lot of hard work.
Yeah, I'm just going to say that when you finally hung up the bat and stopped playing, I mean, you made the decision to go into commentary and to go into the media, and I'm so glad you did. But did you miss the playing side of it? I mean, were the first couple of years a great frustration to you because you've kind of almost want to be out there bowling every ball, as it were?
No frustration at all. In fact, I was quite happy to retire because I'd made my decision to retire and not come to England again in 1964. I came over as captain 61, and I'd been on two other tours, 56 and 53. But it was my decision to go into the media, and I was a journalist on the police round section of the Sydney Sun newspaper. So I was a journalist well before I did any television, 7 years in fact. Television started in Australia in 1956, and it wasn't until 1963 that I did some work for BBC. It was because of a course I'd done with the BBC, an unofficial course organised by Tom Sloan, the head of Light Entertainment, and he did it, and I worked on the course for 3 weeks, 11 a.m. to midnight every day, while the rest of the team were off in the fleshpots of the continent before we went to Pakistan and India. And it was invaluable to me. It taught me a lot, listening to, I hadn't met them, Longhurst and Maskell, Henry Longhurst, Dan Maskell, and then walking around with Peter O'Sullivan at the Newbury autumn meeting, and being able to see how he organised himself. So all those things went into the fact that I wanted to do some television, but I wasn't quite sure how I was going to do it. And then BBC, Peter Dimmock and Brian Cowgill, they were the ones who changed the commentary roster to bring me in as a summariser, and then fairly quickly as a commentator.
And looking back, do you wish you'd have spent the time in the fleshpots, or would you rather have stayed with the BBC?
I'd rather be with the BBC. There's no fleshpots there.
You mentioned Peter O'Sullivan, and I was amazed because you were saying about how organised he was, and that was one of the things that struck you. I mean, these kind of people were held up by the BBC, as you say, the Dan Maskells and those kind of people at the time were held up as kind of inspiration for you. Did you feel sort of in awe of these people, as it were? Because you said how organised Peter was, and it kind of struck you at the time, didn't it, really?
Well, it certainly did. The thing that struck me about Longhurst and Maskell was that they didn't talk much. They only added to what was on the screen. And they were being informative to the people on the other end of the microphone, explaining to them what the picture meant rather than describing what the picture was. And that was something I was taught very, very quickly, and then when I checked around, I found that the best commentators were doing exactly the same thing. They were informing and helping the people on the other end of the microphone.
It's interesting you say, people think that it's kind of easy, don't they? I bet they come up to you and say, God, what a great job you've got, Richie. You just sit there and have the cream teas and a bit of cake, and you sit there and you watch the game that you love. But of course, it is all about preparation. It's all about knowing the game. It's all about being immersed in the game, isn't it, as well?
Yeah, it's a case of get yourself organised. Put your brain in gear first, and don't open your mouth until you know exactly what you're going to say. That's the other I suppose the other way of looking at it is never believe you're being paid by the word, and that can get away from you if you're new to television, and you've got this feeling I've got to say, there was a long silence there. I've got to say something. Well, you've just got to have your brain in gear. And my mother, who's still alive, she had a great saying for my brother and myself. Make sure you think very hard about whatever you're doing. Do your best, and don't take yourself too seriously. And I think that's good advice from a 100-year-old lady who is, when I phoned her on last Monday after Trent Bridge and said to her, how are you? She said, I've just been watching the last 2 hours on tape of the Trent Bridge Test match. John, my brother, brought it down to me, taped it last night, brought it down to me, and Kay Johnson, that's a girlfriend of my mother's, they had sat there for 2 hours and watched it, and she said it's been so exciting.